following show contains adult content. It's not our intent to offend anyone, but we want to inform you that if you are a child under the age of 18 or get offended easily, this next show may not be for you. The content, opinions, and subject matter of these shows are solely the choice of your show hosts and their guests, and not those of the Entertainment Network or any affiliated stations. Any comments or inquiries should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for listening.
Hey everyone, and welcome to 50 Shades of Bullshit. I'm your host, Christine Lalonde, and this is the podcast where we uncover the truth about online dating. Now let's begin.
Hey everyone, this is Christine, and we are on 50 Shades of Bullshit. This week, Jada is not with us. She has a match that she matched that got engaged, and success story. They are having an engagement party, so she is not joining us. But today we have joining us again is Steve Oskard. Do I say your name right? Oskard?
Oskard.
Oskard.
Oskard, yeah.
Not like ox, like, you know.
No X. People try to do funny things with my name. It's really rather simple.
Well, hi, Steve. Thanks
Hello.
for coming back and being my co-host and special guest this week. We love having you, honestly. So today we're talking about post-traumatic empowerment, reclaiming your voice and choice. Well, Steve is here for this topic today because he is a sex and relationship coach, a somatic sex educator, and embodiment counselor. Steve actually specializes in working with clients to discover how we hold shame and trauma in our bodies so they can access a deeper and more intimate relationship with their own bodies as well as with their partners. He works with individuals, couples, groups, and people of all gender expressions and sexual orientations. So today, Steve, I thought you were perfect to be our guest and co-host for this topic because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and that is a topic and subject line that is, very familiar with me.
Yeah.
And so I was super excited because I feel very safe, very comfortable, and with you. And I find that you are very generous with your empathy and your kindness. And I think that if I was to talk about this with any man, you would be my first choice.
Thank you.
So, when we talk about post-traumatic empowerment, what does that mean for you, Steve?
Well, you messaged me this week and you asked, do you have any ideas for a title? And it jumped out at me because I think when a lot of people work with trauma, the focus is on the trauma itself and not what's possible on the other side. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important. We can end up almost fetishizing the trauma. Sometimes we get so focused on looking at excavating the wound or tending to the wound that we forget that the only point in really doing that work, and there's all kinds of wonderful ways to do that work, is for what becomes available on the other side, to have a sense of power and joy and possibility in your life. Otherwise, you're just torturing yourself, and I think even in general, even in non-traumatic experiences, going back and looking at our past, if we're not celebrating it, then why are we doing it if it does not give us access to more freedom and joy? So I wanted to share that from the beginning.
I'm so glad you did, because, when I thought about this month and what it stands for, why we are looking at domestic violence and why we're talking about it now, is because for me, when I look back in my past, in a different timeline for myself, I looked at it as, painful and traumatic and difficult to talk about and very emotional, and it just really embodied me. And I was thinking about it today and thinking about, how am I going to feel? What am I going to think? And I just actually look back at my past now, because I'm in a different timeline and I'm in a different healed space,
Mhm.
that I look back and think, okay, it doesn't define who I am, but it sure helped. It helped me grow into the person that I am today, happy, healthy. I mean, happy,
Yeah.
and can talk about my past trauma in a way that I hope that other people can see, that we can thrive beyond it, and the joy that we can find in our lives after we've learned to deal with it and let it go, express it. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, you just remind me of a quote. I'll see if I can find it really fast. But it really is something along the lines of, I find it to be great, but otherwise we'll move on. But it's something, our wounds don't define us. They don't. And yet they're a tremendous access for growth and learning and healing. So, don't sweep them under the rug
I
and
agree.
pretend they're not there, but let's not go live there, you know?
I think that a lot of abuse and a lot of violent abuse that women, children, men, just people go through. Okay,
Mhm.
because it's not just about women anymore. When it comes to domestic violence, children are affected, and sometimes it's the other way around. Men are experiencing it, and a lot to do with this type of situation is shame.
Yeah.
People are embarrassed and they think that something's wrong with them, and they think that people are going to look down on them. And I think a lot of people who have never experienced it are really quick to say, well, just leave, or just do this, or just do that. There is no just anything
Yeah.
when you're dealing with somebody who's being abused in some way,
Yeah.
I guess you
And
could say.
yeah, and it's very similar to grief. There's no formula for it.
Mm,
There are a lot of methodologies. There's a lot of models in healing. Everything in every branch of psychotherapy has its own tools,
mhm.
and somatic work and all, but there's no formula. No one size fits all for
Correct.
healing, nor is there a timeline. It's like we all have our own path in healing. And I did
Mm.
find that quote. Can I share it with you?
Yes,
So
I
it
would
was,
love it.
when I first came across it, it was Jane Fonda who said it, but in her quote, she's quoting somebody else. So she acknowledges that she's quoting somebody else. So I don't know who said this, the first part originally, but the second part I wrote. So the first part is, God doesn't come into us through awards and ceremony. God comes into us through our scars and wounds. But we
Mm,
must learn that our wounds don't define us. This is the second part.
mm,
When we can begin to see our wounds as our greatest access to discovering and creating who we are, then the trauma from our past becomes the seeds of our dreams for the future, the gift of possibilities yet to be.
I love that. That's actually really beautiful, because if you stop to think about, maybe seeing your scars and wounds as battle, victory marks,
Mhm.
um, oh, Misty said something, and I sorry, it jumped into my peripheral vision, and I didn't want to finish my sentence because it's irrelevant now.
Mhm.
Misty actually says, "Why isn't leaving the situation the first thought?" I
Mm.
have my own opinion, but
Mhm.
Steve, what do you think yours is?
Well, I love that we're having some participation. We'll transition to the question, because
Yeah.
really, Missy, we were talking about kind of how to heal, but really, uh, I mean, ideally, yeah, if someone feels empowered and is
Mhm.
able to say, "Hey, I got to get out of here," hallelujah. And yet, many times, first of all, many times abuse is a invisible thing. It's
Mhm.
not obvious. It's not physical. It's not aggressive. It's not pain, but it's emotional. So a lot of times, somebody will be in a situation they don't realize I'm being abused, or I'm being dominated against my will. So, Misty, we're shifting the conversation to follow you, but yes.
Yeah.
Why isn't the first thought, well, for someone who's healthy and aware and present and able, that is the smart choice for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. My thoughts when I think about that question, Steve and Misty, is twofold, kind of. Someone that finds themselves in a situation where they are seeing red flags, because basically that's what Misty is saying, that there's red flags. There's two things about that. One, I think personally, my own personal opinion, because of my situation, I find that damaged people are easily found by those who love to damage people.
And you're just pointing to, it looks like Anastasia, her question is kind of right along the lines of what you're talking about. Like we tend to call into our lives experiences that are a reflection of of old wounding. So
Right.
maybe obvious to everyone else, like, what are you doing with this person?
Yeah.
But you are replaying or repeating a historical experience from your past.
Yeah, I think that, like what I was kind of saying is a little bit to Anastasia. She said, and for those who are listening, Anastasia said, when it is obvious to everybody except you, why don't you listen to what the people are saying to you? And there's so much levels and depth and veins underneath that, because again, well, Steve was saying earlier also is that people who are abusive are very, very good at being charming and being under the radar. They look healthy to everyone else, and they're very charming to you. They're very charming to your family, to your friends. Now, some people who are healthy can see these signs and these red flags, but those who are falling in love with them or in a relationship with them, they tend to not allow that stuff to really come out for a long time till you're in deep, like in love, or you are living with them, or you're relying on them financially. They also separate you from your friends, your family, and they make it difficult for you to leave. So it's not something that is just a big sign out there that says, hey, I'm about to abuse you in about 6-7 months to a year. But you know what I mean? How long does it take? Charles says, how long does it take to see the flags yourself? Well, it
Takes as long as it takes. I think, if you were checked in with us a little bit earlier when we just opened the show, it's like there's no formula. There's no formula for healing, and there's no formula for actually recognizing that I'm not in a safe situation, which points back to the other question Anastasia said. When it's obvious to everyone else, if you can't see it, you might just stay in the experience.
Country Corners Gazette says, but things get different behind closed doors. And yeah, that's kind of along the lines of what I was saying about them being charming and being loving and respectful in public. But at home, they could start with little things like calling you overweight, or saying that you're ugly, or that you're stupid, or something that is an insecurity. Maybe there's a mole on your neck and they constantly say how hideous you are because of the stupid mole. And they'll do anything to take you down. And so, I think most of the time it starts emotionally and mentally, and then it can evolve into physically. It takes a while. Yeah. So a lot of things are running through my head right now.
Yeah. And I think, I'd like to open another possible narrative. So like, since we named this post-traumatic empowerment, like what is possible on the other side? Because I think, and I see some of these questions, I totally understand the desire to want to understand what's going on when we're in a non-consensual experience at the low end to abuse at the other end. Like, how do people get there? I can really understand that. And I know that topic has really been delved into quite deeply by many people. What I'm interested in and hope we can get into in this show is what's possible for our healing, because that's what I do. I work with people to create a life of joy, and not have what happened to me define me or be a wound that's always painful. We will always have access to painful memories, but they don't have to define us, like what we talked about earlier.
I like the idea. We all know abuse happens mentally, emotionally, psychologically. I guess that's the same thing as mentally, physically. There's so many ways of abusing somebody. It could just be, disrespect in front of their friends and family. And this could be just the one thing that they always do. But I will say just out of experience, that if little things like that start to happen, and to me, that's not really a little thing, but what I'm meaning by little thing in the scope of all things, domestic violence, it can evolve into very aggressive fighting, screaming, yelling, name calling, just little mental things, emotional things that, like we said, that affect you in your own deep level. And then it can go to physical real fast. It could start with a shove, a push to the side. And then I always say this: when my girls started getting older and they were teenagers and they started calling each other, the B word, the bitch word, she's such a bitch. And I always say to them, look, that first time you say that, it gets easier and easier and easier to say it every single time.
Yeah.
And you have to be aware of what you're saying and doing to other people. It's just the smallest things can grow into something big so fast. But I want to talk about the becoming empowered. How do we move forward after trauma and learn how to live with it, deal with it, and grow with it?
Yeah. I just want to comment on what you said about your teenage example. When you do lash out either verbally or physically aggressively with anger, even though it's easier each time, because like, hey, I poked him with the, and that got him back, it never feels good. It never feels good at the core of yourself, even if you were able to dominate someone in a certain circumstance or situation, and you might get a momentary rush. That's why persecutors do what they do. It doesn't feel good. They know it's incongruent with being a loving human being. And I think we're all born into life to be that kind of a person. So yeah. I didn't want to step over that, but to get to your question, and really the intention of our show is like, what happens on the other side? How do you begin to heal? So I think there's, congruent with what I was just saying is, what does joy feel like? You might have been living a life where you don't have access to that. And some of us from our childhood, we actually don't have a sense of what feeling good feels like.
Yes. And when we do, it may not be the most healthy for us, like drugs, alcohol, sex addictions, things that could be potentially dangerous for us, because it's giving us something that's different and feels kind of good. So it's opposite of what they've been experiencing with the violence. So sometimes those kind of things can draw us in a direction that we don't want to go, but it feels joyous. It feels good.
Well, I like to use the word gratifying. Gratification versus real pleasure and fulfillment. So gratification could even be a way to disassociate. Like like use of substances, or even pleasure,
Mhm.
not true pleasure, a distraction, like sex as a distraction, or self-pleasure as a distraction. That's not truly tuning in. It's a way to tune out. And I think there are people that do that.
Mhm. Yeah, they want to avoid that. I do want to cover a couple of comments here really quick before we keep moving on. Mickey said when people do wake up and realize they are not going to PT up with any put up with any more need to get out and make a clean break. I wanted to bring this into that comment in, because there are so many things that can make a person wake up. It's different, just the same as the violence is different, or the process of getting there is different. The process of getting out is also different. What are your thoughts, Steve, on finding that place for someone?
And making a clean break, I think,
That's the hardest part.
yeah, easier said than done. And also, easier said than done. And also, again, back to the idea that there's no formula. I mean, if I look to my own life and I see a relationship that was not at all abusive, but it was painful for me to really come to terms with that this relationship was not working, it took me a lot of time. And I know that for myself, I process things by talking through them a lot. But I can't just kind of talk to somebody who's just like, oh yeah, nice, interesting. And, talking with a particular intention to release something. I noticed that some people, and particularly when they're talking about painful experiences, they're recycling the experience. So whether or not you're able to make a clean break, recognize how you best process things to let go. Sometimes it's looking backwards and kind of seeing what was painful, talking about it, sharing about it with the intention to release, and simultaneously also having your attention on the future. So you kind of have a foot in both worlds, in the world of what you want to bring into your life, something more healthy, something joyous, and access to that, while at the same time, what it is that you want to let go of.
Country Corners Gazette made a point that I liked. They said it doesn't have to only be a marriage. It can be a boss, a friend, family. These are different type of relationships. Yeah, domestic violence for me, or just violence in general, meaning mentally, physically, emotionally, all these things that we've been talking about, yes, can be from all different facets of your life. It can be friends. Certain kind of friends can, treat you weird. Bosses can treat you differently for whatever reason. But
And it's important, though, to distinguish between something that is unhealthy and or traumatic and something that's upsetting. A lot of people nowadays, I think we talked about at the beginning of the call today, that a lot of times people are fetishizing their trauma or their drama. They're talking about things. Okay, you're just upset. You're not traumatized. So I think we need to be really mindful of how we talk about our pain and not dramatize it so that it becomes traumatic. And then also recognize what is unhealthy, what is detrimental to my life.
Right. When we were getting ready to start the show, you had made a comment about how trauma has been like overused. What were you saying with that?
Yeah, just completely similar to what I just said. I think and our culture and in the media, we're using the word trauma or overusing it almost. And in fact, a lot of trauma experts, they're not saying the same thing that's spilling into the public narrative. They're doing great work and discovering many ways to really address trauma and how it sits in our nervous system, how it limits our ability to function in the world. There's that whole experience, but then there's upsetting experiences, disappointing life experiences, and kind of the narrative in our public is almost blending the two. And I want to make sure that we as a culture begin to be mindful of that and not start talking about, something ridiculous that's actually not traumatic. But one caveat about that is that what's traumatic to one person might not be traumatic to another person. What's trivial to one person might actually be traumatic to somebody else. So again,
Correct.
There's no formula, there's no standard. It's really looking to see how something has impacted someone and how that's affecting them out living their daily life.
I saw something, I think it was like a week ago. I was doing a bunch of research and looking at some things, and I saw this thing, and it said that there was a study that they took domestic violence victims. Let's just call them victim at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
The person who went through this violence, and not only that, but a narcissistic. They also took people who had been through God bless America, I cannot speak today. Narcissistic abuse. Okay. Mm-hmm. So they took those type of people, and then they took war vets. Okay. And they did brain scans on all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they compared the brain scans of war veterans who had been through traumatic war, who had PTSD, known PTSD. And they compared those brain scans to people who had gone through domestic violence and narcissistic abuse. And their brains matched.
Mm.
The damage in the brain, the lesions that can be caused from PTSD, from people who've experienced a traumatic situation, has lesions in their brain that are similar to somebody who have been through traumatic war. And it is, I can attest to that's how it feels. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I also want to just highlight one thing, that they're actually speaking of it a bit differently as opposed to damage. Because what they used to say is neurons that fire together wire together. And it was believed that, that's the way that it is. So if you formulate a pattern and the pattern was based in trauma, that you're going to always be living in this traumatic cycle. And then they discovered, and what's become very popular now is the term neuroplasticity, is that that's not necessarily a life sentence. That the possibility of developing new neural pathways, new behaviors, new feelings and emotions, that is actually possible. And the damage is not necessarily damage. So why there's so much discovery around trauma and so much work being done. And thank God that is available for veterans. And there's more and more being done for people who have experienced the traumas of war. I'd say that's really pushing forward the importance of doing work in trauma, is people actually begin to see that they could actually create their lives not based on their history.
Well, I can say 100% that I truly know that what you just was talking about is true, because I'm a living representation of that. Yeah. I grew up in abuse from early childhood, seeing domestic abuse with my mother and real father, mental, emotional, sexual, just violence growing up as a young adult and child and teenager, leaving home and going from one abusive home to my husband's abusive home. It's just like relationships for me for years were just like, oh my God. Yeah. And I thought I was stuck in a cycle, and I kept saying, no, I'm going to break it. No, I'm going to break it. I'm going to break this cycle. And in ways I did not, and in ways I did, until I realized that I don't have to be that person. I don't have to feel that pain anymore. I don't have to live in that timeline. And I don't. I just do not. And I almost feel like when I look back on memories, I almost see it almost like a movie, like it's somebody else's life. I know it's mine. I know I experienced it,
Yeah.
but my brain is completely different than it ever was
Yeah.
before. So
Yeah.
you can get out, you can heal, you can grow, you can live a life of joy and success and all those things. I'm living fucking testament of it. If
Well,
I can do it, somebody else can.
yeah. And I'll tell you what they're starting to see is what are some of the elements that make that possible for someone. So having access to feeling safe. So you mentioned the word empathy when you describe me, and thank you. I love that. I've cultivated an experience of connecting with people.
Yeah.
So in order to heal, having an environment, someone or a group of someone's, a community of people that you feel seen, you feel appreciated and known, so that you can actually feel safe,
Yeah.
that you have access to creativity, curiosity, wonder. Those are elements, and I speak from like a somatic sense, like in your body, you feel like you can actually explore in the world, like when we were free as children. So those are some of the elements that allow someone to heal. And someone said, Nikki, in the notes a while back, and you kind of touched on this. I've seen too many people go back and get in worse situations because the other person said they would change. Sometimes a familiar pain feels safer than the unknown.
Yes.
And it could be very confusing and kind of strange. Like, what are you talking about? But
Yeah.
the familiar pain can sometimes feel safer because it's a known entity. I've survived it before. Even neurobiologically, we know we survived the pain and physical abuse if that was the circumstances. So I know I can survive it, but I don't know what's around the corner. So the unknown can sometimes be scarier. So back to what I was saying is feeling safe, having access to joy, creativity, a connection with others.
Yeah, I think finding things that you enjoy, that you can put you're just like, all self into. Like, I do know that a lot of people who are in certain situations of violence tend to keep their head down and just keep going every day. And they don't look at what are their hobbies, what are things that make them happy. They don't have a lot of those things in their life. They have stepped away because they can't take any kind of happiness and joy and put it into that, because everything is keeping them safe, making them feel like they're not just freaking dying in their minds.
Yeah.
It's the only way I could think to put it. So for me, when I got out of those situations, I started looking for like groups of things where people had the same likes.
Yeah.
Like if you love knitting, go to knitting circles. If you love to read, find book clubs. There are Facebook groups, Instagram groups, TikTok groups, and there's online, there's outlets in your cities and towns that allow you to find other like-minded people, and just finding people who listen, who care, and are in a good place in their life, help you feel like you're connecting, like you said, is important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a very big proponent for being engaged in life somatically, movement, breath work. There's all kinds of things out there where you can begin to find your threshold of awareness, your threshold of presence. So you could even do that with fitness, like you run and then you could start to see where, I use the word disassociate, where you're no longer able to be present. So some people do it in meditation, some people do it in yoga, and because built into some of the Eastern traditions like yoga or martial arts or meditation is a mindfulness, an awareness of your body while you're engaging in some kind of activity. And you can start to see where you go away. And then you could actually find your threshold of awareness, your threshold of presence. And that's incredibly powerful.
I like that. I was wondering how also, we had talked about reclaiming your voice and your choice. How do you suggest people start to find that path,
Mm.
find a way to get there?
Well, why I kind of pointed to those mindfulness practices or embodiment practices is because once you begin to be aware of where you're present and where you're not, I mean, that's like the first step. Where do I disassociate? Where do I go away? You can start to map that onto all the other things that you do in your life. Like if you're having a conversation, like here we are having a conversation. I can't kind of go off like this, If we did, you would see where Steve got, so I have to bring myself forth. And this is not a scripted conversation.
Correct.
You ask me a question, I'm like, okay, I've got to respond in real time here. Stay with the topic. So
No editing.
I've loved doing these with you, and I love being invited on these because it requires me to be present and mindful and have some sort of continuity with the activity, with the conversation. The same thing with having dinner with friends or doing some kind of physical activity, or in being engaged in all the different places in your life. Here's a great one for me: reading. If I start reading fiction, I go away really fast. And I used to be so ashamed that I couldn't get a few pages without having to turn back and start over, because I used to think, oh God, maybe I have ADHD or whatever. But I just started to think, well, I'm just so creative that I started imagining other realms, like I'm reading about Joe walks into the room. I'm thinking about what the room next door looks like. So my creativity is engaged, but I wasn't able to be rigorous and stay with the material. So noticing that and being in certain circumstances in your life where you begin to bring awareness is one of the embodied practices I think is so powerful.
I love that. When you were talking about that, when you talked about reading a book, for me, I'm incredibly visual. So when I'm reading the words, I'm not even consciously aware of it, but in my mind, I actually see the scene that I'm reading play out. I see people, I see the room, so it's a movie in my mind, which is incredible, because I found out recently there are people who cannot talk to themselves, who hear no voice, see no pictures, nothing in their head. And I think, oh my God, what a very limited experience they're experiencing. Speaking of experiences to experience, you mentioned breath work, and I had the incredible opportunity a year ago. I can't believe it's been a little over a year now since I learned about breath work, and I had no idea what it was. And then as I started experiencing it, I thought, oh God, thank God I didn't know what it was, because I went in flabbergasted at what was happening. I think that if I'd known ahead of time, I might have been afraid. But now looking at it, I want to tell people that breath work allows you to get to the other side of things. Like if you're going through PTSD or trauma or something that is really holding you back and affecting you, getting to that, getting through it and to the other side, you may think, oh, maybe I should be afraid of what I'm going to think and feel. Oh, it's so beautiful. And when you get to that other side, the joy and the like, wow moment is something that I can't even imagine never knowing. So for people who might be afraid to try breath work is deliciously beautiful. And getting through it is incredible. I mean, just the journey itself it's just you're breathing and you're listening to the music and your mind is going to places, and it's the best thing I ever did for
Yeah.
myself.
Well,
Yeah.
I have had amazing experiences with breath work, and one I remember where I just was sobbing during the experience,
Me
and I
too.
wasn't crying about anything in particular. It wasn't like I was
Mhm.
upset about something or angry
Right.
or sad. It
No.
was a release. And
Mhm.
if you want to nerd out for a second, I'll tell you what happens in our nervous system
Yeah.
is what happens with breath work, and not just breath work, but all other embodiment practices, is we get access to regulating our nervous system, which is happening automatically all the time. The brain and nervous system are always regulating how we be and function in the world. But particularly and with trauma, you might be at a very heightened state of vigilance, like
Mm.
kind of always bracing yourself. So people who have had trauma, and not only people with severe trauma, but walk through life kind of bracing themselves, like waiting for the other shoe to drop, or
Right.
in a like almost defensive posture in relationship to the world around them.
Mm.
What embodied practices, and in this case breath work, allow you to do is to regulate. First of all, you're in a safe environment. The people
Mhm.
tell you, okay, we're going to be doing this. We're going to be breathing in this rhythm or this pattern. And everybody in the room's doing the same thing. You're
Mhm.
in an enclosed space, and nobody's going to come in from the outside and disrupt things. So
Mhm.
there's the environment, and then you do the breathing practice, and it allows you to tune in and either intentionally raise your nervous system, you upregulate your nervous system, or downregulate. But what you actually get access to is the up or down. You are then seeing, I'm in charge of the machinery here. I'm
Yeah.
in charge of my system. I can
Yeah.
relax. And when that begins to happen, and particularly as you begin to downregulate and relax, you are more available to the whole spectrum of emotions. Some people laugh during breath work, people cry, so you have access to even ecstatic states. I don't necessarily
Mhm.
mean sexual, but heightened
Right.
arousal. And it's
Right.
really beautiful. And I think so many
Yeah.
people are getting so much value out of it.
Yeah, some people might be under the impression, if they're listening to this and they don't know much about breath work, that they might be in a group setting. It is a group internet setting. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Like, it's online, you log in.
Okay. Yeah.
That's what I did. Did you do it in an actual group
I
setting?
have been in, kind of like a
Mm.
yoga studio where people
Oh,
are
okay.
there. So there's different settings for sure. And I know people got really creative with COVID where you could do it in a
Yeah.
group Zoom chat or something
Yeah.
like that. So there's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
whole,
That's the one I experienced.
you could even follow a video, where no one's there and you're just
Right.
watching a video on YouTube or something.
Yeah, the one I logged into, it's online. I log in and then I just put the phone by the bed, and I had, the eye mask, and I had pillows, and I got in really comfortable shorts and tank, and, just, dim the light, did my thing, had candles going, and really set the atmosphere for myself. And I felt very safe and comfortable, and it allowed me to just experience. And I definitely cried. I, but it was like a release, like you
Yeah.
said. It wasn't like, oh, feeling sad. It was just a release in our bodies and minds, spirits, our souls. We need that release.
Yeah.
And I found myself saying wow a lot because I was seeing past lives.
Hmm.
Um, I was seeing epiphanies. I was experiencing a full body, like, knowledge of things. It was the best thing I'd ever done. And
Yeah.
I love breath work.
Mm.
I highly suggest it.
Yeah. Very powerful way to
Very.
access healing.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm. We've got about, I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes left. Time goes so fast.
Yeah. My
But,
goodness.
um, w when we talk about regaining our voices and regaining our choices, do you think that, like we'd said, starting slowly with our friends, with our families, with people that maybe we feel like we can maybe turn to is the best way to start? Or do you think that people should turn to professionals? And I like that you're a somatic coach, right?
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
So for you, when you're not just letting people just like, like a therapist, they're not just talking it out. You're actually guiding them with in a way as well. How does that work?
Great question. I'm gonna be kind of silly and say I start with the ABCs.
Okay.
What I call the ABCs are agency,
Hmm.
boundaries, and consent. And I think it all starts with the agency, which to me is that you have a voice and your voice matters.
Hmm.
And then from there, you'll seek out connections where, like we've been talking about, you feel safe.
Hmm.
You're connected to your body, you're connected to yourself, you're connected to your desires, your wants, wishes, hopes, dreams, and you can actually begin to talk about them. So it's safe. Like I could actually share with you something that I've been thinking about or dreaming about. I'm not having to hide it or feel ashamed or embarrassed. So I
Right.
think partially finding our voice is one, knowing that I have a voice. Some of us
Hmm.
are, especially since, a big part of this topic is about domestic violence abuse awareness month, that people feel like they don't have a voice. They grew up not feeling like they had a voice. So
Hmm.
agency is really a state of being where you know that my voice matters. I have a voice and I could begin to share it. And boundaries and consent, we could talk about some other time, but boundaries really would be, and I think I've even said it on some of our other calls, that in
Hmm.
engagement with others, how do you create boundaries and consensual dialogues, conversations, and even ways of touching?
I think that it is important for people to understand that so many things have been taboo in life. One of those is talking about abuse in any way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
And one of the most important things when starting this show was to help people have a voice, to help people understand that nothing is fucking taboo anymore.
Mhm.
It's important to talk it out. It's important to bring it to light. The only way to stop something from happening is shine light upon it.
Mm. Yeah.
So I think that's important. I think something that people need to realize that there are people out here listening and we're speaking on your behalf. I'm here to help people understand that there is light at the end of that tunnel. That the tunnel isn't the end. It's the entrance to the rest of your life where there's joy and sun and hope and you know.
Yeah. And if I could say something, because you mentioned about working with a professional, I think a couple of key things if someone chooses to work with a professional, that more important than their methodology or what branch of psychology or what training they may have had, more important than any of that is, do you feel safe with this person? Could I share with this person? And that's a great starting point. And I would even say, can I fall apart? Can I imagine myself falling apart with this person and if they saw me crying, but I feel okay, but I feel well held with this person.
Oh,
So
I
that I
love
think is
that.
a great starting point.
I think that those of you who are out there listening, if you're in a place where you need someone to talk to, you need to turn to someone, you need help in any way, shape, or form, Steve is incredible. Um, you're, I don't even know the word. I know the feeling, Steve.
Mhm.
You're an incredible space to be around. For those of you who do need help, you can reach out to Steve at Steve, Steve, at theremedyonline.com. I noticed that you put a number there too. Are you good with me saying
Yeah,
your number?
through
Okay,
to my
your business direct line.
yeah.
818-601-0550. Steve is there to help anybody in
Yeah.
any space that you need.
Yeah, and I'm great at helping people find resources. If I'm not your cup of tea, which, hey, I won't be insulted. Feelings won't be hurt, but it's more important to me that people find that person that they feel safe with, that they can explore with.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, try breath work. It's very easy. Just Google breath work and there's many outlets. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. Always the good shows go way too fast. My hair
Wow.
But we're going to have you back again, Steve. We absolutely love having you here. It's for those of you who come on and participate and comment and ask questions each week. We love you. Keep coming back. Same time, same place as this. Good Lord, here we go again. I can't speak. Same time, same place next week. And until then, let's keep this shit real.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share with your friends, like and follow us on Instagram at 50 Shades of _bullshit and Facebook at 50 Shades of Bullshit. Thanks so much for listening, and we really hope to see you again next week.